This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, Cindy. I will say this is the 25th of August. It's the August meeting of the Heritage Preservation Commission. This is the regularly scheduled meeting time. It is 5:30. I'm calling the meeting to order. We have a quorum with all of the members present, and we're also joined by our guest, Brian Jones from Thrivent Financial in St. Peter. The first item of business would be to request the approval of the agenda. Would anyone be inclined to move approval of the agenda?
I so move.
I think that was Sharon.
Right.
And a second by
Joe.
Joe Metzen. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We do have an agenda. In the packet, you had the minutes from the June 30th, 2020 meeting. I do apologize. I did not give Cindy the minutes from the special meeting. They'll be out in your next packet. I apologize for that. Would anyone move approval or note any changes to the minutes presented from the June 30th meeting?
I move approval. Potts?
We have a motion by Chairman Potts. Is there a second?
Emily will second.
I second. Yep.
We have a second
Two
by
seconds.
Bruflat. For those that don't have cameras, it can get a little tough, but we have a motion by Potts, second by Bruflat. All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes as presented, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we have a motion, we have approved minutes. Excuse me one second. Apologize for that. Unfinished business. At the last meeting, we considered the St. Peter Fire Station at 227 West Mulberry. It is appropriate that the Heritage Preservation undertake what's called the Chapter 106 review. That's Chapter 106 of the federal legislation. And it's necessary and appropriate given that a large portion of the funding for the fire station is intended to come from rural development, the USDA rural development. At the last meeting, I presented that, in my opinion, it necessarily wasn't a resource that would be required or necessary to be preserved. And as the commission had their conversation, it was clear that there were contrary opinions. And so I was asked then to prepare a resolution that would suggest that the demolition of the existing fire station would adversely impact the remaining properties in the National Register District, as well as, pardon me.
Russ?
Apologize for that.
Russ?
So I had prepared, excuse me?
This is Sharon. I just need a clarification. When you're talking about it's the fire station where the firemen are housed now that you're talking about, right?
Yes, ma'am. The one at the corner of Mulberry
Okay.
and 3rd Street.
Yeah, right across from the co-op. It's not that. Okay.
Yes. At the
Yep.
last meeting, we
Okay.
went through some of the details of its history. We noted its proximity within the Heritage Preservation District, the impact on what's called the view shed of the individual properties that are listed on the National Register. And again, I had recommended the resolution and prepared one for your consideration that would suggest that the asset would be expendable upon the redevelopment or repurposing of the property, and the commission disagreed. And so I was asked, as I was explaining earlier, to prepare a resolution that was contrary to my original one that would suggest the demolition or removal of the asset would adversely impact the National Register and the St. Peter Commercial Historic District. So that resolution is prepared and included in your packet, beginning on page 8 and continuing on page 9. I'd ask if you want to go further into the discussion, or after I know there are a few that weren't here last month, or if you have questions or comments. And I'm going to go through it again by the list, and I'll start with Chairman Potts.
I'm okay with this proposed resolution. I think if the time that somebody really wants to redevelop that property, and demolish it, the city council can revisit that and we can revisit that as a commission. But I think in terms of protecting the preservation area, I think we have to be pretty conservative about this particular, about this issue. And so I'm happy with the resolution that you put forward, Russ.
Thank you, Chairman Potts. Member Bruflot, any comments, questions?
I generally agree with Chairman Potts on this. I think it's okay to be conservative, and it's okay to make sure that we're very careful if any changes are made to that property, because we do want to protect the historic district. That said, myself personally, if something came before the council that looked really appealing, that would be more, let's say, environmentally conscious, ADA compliant, etc., those are things that are a little bit more important to me than outside appearance. But I do value the historic district as well and would work to preserve that. So I am okay with the resolution as.
Thank you, Member Bruflat. Member Metzen, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable passing a resolution that requires a buyer to preserve the current fire station. I'm not sure that the building is unique enough, special enough, such that it's something where losing it would adversely affect the character and appeal of the preservation district and the commercial historic district. You know, I don't want it to be torn down, but I don't know about requiring its preservation. An interested buyer.
Thank you, Joe. I will note the HPC's recommendation in passing this resolution would be advisory to the council. So they will take that into consideration, and I know there's been some interest in the building as it exists. Pardon me. Let's see, go down my list. Terry Bergman, any comments, questions?
Well, I believe it should be kept in town, kept up like kind of it is. It's a nice building. So,
thank you, Terry. It has been impeccably maintained. As you'd expect of perhaps a city or a county building. Member Douglas, do you have any comments, questions?
I'm in favor of the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Oviatt?
Here I am. I think Larry said it very well. You know, we are the Heritage Preservation Commission, and I think the preservation is key. One thing to note, it may not be that special. It may not be that wonderful or done by a famous artist, but it's a good utilitarian old building that looks like an old building in an old town. And once it's tore down, you don't have any more buildings. So if we go piecemeal by
I think we're having a little trouble with your audio there, Terry, or Brian, you're breaking up a little bit.
All right, can you hear me now?
Now we can, yep.
Okay, I'll move a little closer. My point is, once we start tearing down these buildings, as simple or as basic as they may be, they still have a charm of an old building. And once we lose these old buildings, we don't get any more. They're gone forever. So we went through a round of that, of course, in '98, and took a hit then. And we can certainly work with, you know, other people and whatnot, developers, and maybe they have something to reuse it or tear part of it down, or, you know, any of those things are certainly possibilities. But to give them carte blanche to tear down on a building that's, you know, street level, no steps, readily accessible, wide open, ready to reutilize, would be a shame, and it would fall back on us. So I like the resolution as is, and I echo Larry's statement.
Thank you, Brian. Member Litinsky, comments, questions?
Yeah, I agree with like the keeping the resolution as is. I feel the same way as the former speaker did. Once you tear down a building, you can't get it back. And sometimes when you tear down buildings and you put up something new, it just really destroys the charm of the town. So I hope that we can, go forward and keep things more in the 1800s style instead of getting the slicked up of this 21st century. So I think, the way you presented the resolution is the way to go.
Very well. If anyone would want to make a second comment, I'd just say turn on your microphone and go. Otherwise, if anyone would be willing to move the resolution that's prepared on page 8 and 9.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, certainly, Joe.
Yeah, you said that our vote is just advisory on the city council?
Yes.
They make the ultimate decision of who to sell it to, what conditions.
Yes, and I know that they will take your recommendation seriously, and they will take that into consideration. And I'd expect, as there is in the Heritage Preservation Commission, maybe there would be some varied opinions amongst the council as well. But I will carry forward your recommendation as the staff member to your committee. So, any other questions or anyone want to make a comment? Emily.
Yes, Russ, would you mind explaining a little bit about what we talked about as far as keeping the facade and any, like in the example or just as a hypothetical for a developer?
Well, yeah, there are some techniques, historic preservation techniques that would preserve the existing facade of the fire station as much as or as little as the appropriate authority would determine. And you can find some really nice examples on the internet if you just do facadism. And there's some examples of some very historic buildings then that do have and have accommodated contemporary construction behind them. Actually, as what we always referred to, well, now we referred to, even though it's Sweet Alice's, we refer to it down at City Hall as the Mom and Pop's building. When that original building, probably the oldest existing building in town, was torn down, we explored facadism to maintain the facade, but the building had been deteriorated to the extent that was not feasible or practical in this case. So given, again, the impeccable maintenance and repair of that building, perhaps it could accommodate something of that interest. That's not necessarily a very common historic preservation technique, but it has been utilized in some very historic structures. So again, feel free to Google facadism and you'll get to see some pretty amazing things. But again, that as you and I talked, Emily, at the coffee shop this morning, at a happenstance visit, nothing arranged, that I mentioned that has been undertaken in other cases.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not suggesting that necessarily for the fire hall. It was an interesting concept that I hadn't heard. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, the caller with the barking dog, could you mute your microphone, please?
Oh, yes, I can do that.
Okay, or maybe put the dog in a bedroom for a moment. But yeah, it's coming out rather clear. So anyone else have a comment? If not, would anyone be inclined to move the resolution beginning on page 8?
I'd make a motion.
And that was who?
Oviatt.
Brian?
Oviatt.
Brian? We have a motion by Oviatt. Is there a second?
Potts, second.
I second. Yep.
We have a second by Larry Potts. Any further discussion? I'll give you another opportunity to click on your microphone. Hearing none, and I don't believe Cindy actually has a camera or a microphone, so she's listening on the headphones. I will call the roll call. And again, the motion is to approve the resolution prepared on page 8 and 9, and I will start with Chairman Potts.
Aye.
Member Bruflat.
Aye.
Member Metzen.
Nay.
Member Bergeman. It looks like we might have lost Terry, caller 4, but we still have a quorum. So I will move on to Member Douglas.
Okay.
Member Oviatt.
Aye.
And Member Litinsky.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. It was important we got that done in August. The city is locked into financing with USDA, and I believe it is at 2.25%. So it's a very attractive rate, and we're locked into that for a number of years, so the project can further develop. But I know it's exciting for the firefighters, but it's always nice at City Hall to see some other improvements happening. To move on to new business, Casey West.
Russ, can I have a question?
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you can divulge this, but have you got any information, or can you tell us what any kind of interest there's been and what kind of people, what they're thinking of using it for?
Well, some of the interest was on actually the highway frontage, the parking lot part of that. And we've been marketing that side of the alley since I started here in 2001. We've actually gone out to formal requests for proposals where we've solicited developers and realtors, et cetera. More recently, as we've talked about that, they have eyed the fire station building as part of that to assemble a larger parcel. One had been, well, the city's requirement with the parking lot would be that it have ground floor commercial and then multiple, perhaps, floors of residential, undertaken in a manner that would be sympathetic to the Heritage Preservation District. And the HPC would have comment as that exterior and site plan would be developed. I know others have approached City Administrator Prafke regarding just the acquisition of the fire station parcel then, separate from the highway. And I've heard the most common is a brew pub. But I don't know who the parties were that approached City Administrator Prafke, but as that had been discussed in City Hall and other places, there seems to be, that'd be a nice use. But
what was that? What was that use? I didn't understand you.
A brew pub, like a restaurant.
Oh, a brew pub.
That brews and serves their own beer.
Yeah.
Quite common and quite, probably fits in really nice in the St. Peter community. I'm sure one thing is the opportunity to acquire the property will likely be very public and very open. And then rather than just price, the decision from previous city councils had typically been, what's best for the city of St. Peter, both financially and for use wise, and again, to make that right fit.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, certainly.
Hey, Russ?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, do you want me to come down tomorrow and sign this document?
Yes, if you would. I was gonna call you tomorrow. So if you could come down and sign that, we need to get that to Sally and Finance Director Vogel and City Administrator Prafke, and then they'll get that to the USDA folks. But thank you, Larry. I forgot to ask.
No, that's fine. I'll be there.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to new business? Okay. Casey West has applied on behalf of West and Mager Insurance and Financial Services. They have relocated from the second floor of the Arts Center building to what I always refer to as the Remax building at the corner of Mulberry and Highway 169. Other tenants in that building are the Remax offices, Hess Insurance. There's some other offices in the basement that aren't necessarily signed. But West and Mager would like to have a sign on the exterior of the building advertising their location. And they have proposed a 46-inch by 96-inch. It would be the vinyl sign with the vinyl applique. I typically would discourage that, but previous HPC, and I think there are some existing members, approved the Hesse Insurance Agency sign based on the precedent set with the Remax sign. So I believe it would probably be appropriate, given previous action, to approve the Mager West sign based on the precedence of the Hesse sign, which is established on the precedence of the Remax sign. Very, very similar scale, very, very similar, finish and appearance. And I provided a photo showing the location of the two existing signs. And then Mr. West, I believe I included what he had provided. Yes, you've got the rendering of the signage on page 12, I have no problem with the text or the font or anything of that matter. And then he has superimposed it upon the facade of the building on page 13. I might suggest that the sign be centered between the Remax and the Hesse insurance sign, alternative to perhaps where Casey is indicated on page 13. At this point, I'm going to open it up to questions or comments from the members, and I'm going to start with member Bruflat.
Yeah, I think the sign, I have no issue with how the sign looks. One question, because it's a little bit unclear, on page 12, there is a border around the sign, and on page 14, there is not, or 13, excuse me, labeled 13. Would there be a border around the sign, like a printed black or something to go along with that?
The sign on page 13 doesn't show that. The rendering on page 12, I think, is just showing a border to outline the dimensions of the sign. But if you would like a 1-inch black border similar to what the Remax sign, you can see that does have a little bit of an edging.
Well, yeah, I was thinking Remax and Hesse both have a border, and it might look
Sure.
nice if it also had a border. It would look more intentional.
Yeah.
But
Nice observation.
but I'm open. But anyway, nice design, nice font. It looks fine to me. Thanks.
Yes, I would suggest that if others have a similar opinion, that when it's time to make a motion to approve or disapprove, if you'd like the border, that would be appropriate to edit at that point. Judy, did you have something to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say I think a border is appropriate as well. But if I was Wes and Major, I would, I think the sign is confusing in a sense. I mean, I know that they want W and M, and then they have the West and Major, and to me, it's a little bit too cluttered. And I mean, I'm fine with the sign, no problem. But if I was doing it myself, I would clean it up.
Thank you.
I mean, it's for customer identification and everything. I don't think it's well designed.
Thank you. Mr. Metzen?
I'm fine with the sign. It fits in fine where it is. It's like the same size as the Remax sign, and it's installed at the same height, so it looks fine.
Thank you. Mr. Bergman?
Looks fine. Border would be nice.
Okay, thank you. You're back. Now you're caller 8, Terry. So,
Oh, well,
remember
I don't know
Douglas?
what happened. It dropped.
Yeah, we had a mess at last night's council meeting too. It wasn't, those that were virtual had a hard time and at times couldn't hear those that were live at the community center. So, Mr. Oviatt?
Yeah, I think the sign should match the border with the existing Hess and Remax. It looks like they have a stylized black border, and if those two are the same, I think, and we're going along with this vinyl sign, at least let's make them look the same. So let's go with the same border, the same scallops on the corner. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So, okay. So on the corners, they have kind of a, I guess I call it a reverse scallop.
Yep.
So wherever the other two signs came from, I'm sure this one can look the same. Logo is fine, placement's fine. I do recommend the centering between the two signs. I think that would be appropriate. But yeah, as far as the sign and the size, as long as it's the same as the other two, no problem.
Yep. Just a note on your photocopy might be a little. When I look at the Remax sign, I'm seeing a blue border that matches the blue in their dynamic agents. But I do see Hesse. It looks like his probably is either in that maroon or the black, because the text where it says Hesse is kind of a maroon color. Would you want West Mager? You want? Well, we can get to the motion. Someone can dictate it be black or it match the M in the logo. I guess
yeah,
I'm getting a little bit.
as long as it's a solid color, I guess I don't have an opinion either way. As long as it matches one of the colors in the sign, which appears that the other two have done, that's totally acceptable.
Sure. Member Latinsky, comments? Questions?
Yeah. Well, my comments are going to throw the monkey wrench. Maybe I don't like the Remax sign at all. I think it's totally inappropriate for the historic district. I like the West Major design. I think the fonts are better for a historic area, but I think the Remax sign is the one that I wish their fonts and their the way they've laid it out would match the West Major better. I think West Major is a much better sign for a historic area. I mean, Remax is fine if you're going down Main Street and you just want something that jumps out at you, but I don't like that sign at all.
Yeah, I will note just for everyone that when they present the logo from a national franchise, they don't have any authority to alter that. They are required by their contractual agreement with Remax to present the sign as Remax would approve it. You know, we found the same thing with Thrivent when they were looking to put the awning on the door of the Joseph Mason building. Everything had to be approved by the corporate entity. So unfortunately, we don't necessarily have, according to your ordinance, the ability to say Remax, you've got to have, you know, block letters, or you've got to use sans serif or anything of that nature.
It seems like that's kind of it seems unfortunate when we're you know, the Historic Preservation Society, though, that we have to kowtow to a corporate entity when we're trying to preserve the look of the historic area. That, you know, it's and I think if we could get back to being able to do that, or force the hand to go the other way, we would have a lot easier time of really keeping the integrity of the historic district.
Certainly. Thank you, Sharon. Any
Yeah,
other comments?
you're welcome.
Questions? Just the second round, you can just speak up. So we don't prepare a resolution for these typically. Get rid of that phone call. Would anyone make a motion to approve or deny, or approve with the conditions that we had discussed? Again, perhaps with reversed scalloped corners, which I think is wholly appropriate. Say a 1-inch border of either one of the two colors utilized on the signage other than the white, and centered on the facade between the Remax and the Hesse Insurance, and any other issues that you would like to add to a resolution, or again, to a motion. Anyone?
I make a motion.
To a blanket approval, or again, to have the conditions?
To approval with the, with what we just set out there.
Okay, centered on the facade between the two sides, a 1-inch border of a contrasting color utilized in the text
border.
sign, and a scalloped corner, or reversed.
Yeah,
okay.
whatever the border is that the other two have, be it 1 inch, 2 inch, 1.5 inch, whatever it is, as long as it matches a matching border.
Very good. We have a motion. Would there be a second to Mr. Oviatt's motion?
Terry will second it.
I got Emily second.
Okay.
Well, it's a tie, but
Either way,
I got to pick. I got to pick one, and so we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? And I'm not going to go through the roll. I'd say speak up, turn on your mic.
Just one, I don't want to derail anything here, but just
I'm sorry,
about,
Mr. Potts. I forgot to ask for your comments. I apologize.
No, it's okay. How many businesses are in that building, and are we going to be asked to put up a fourth sign? That may have something to do with whether you center it now or not.
Yeah, well, it is a multiple tenant building. These are what I would consider to be the three predominant tenants. I don't know if Abdi Matan has his services that he provides to our predominantly East African community, but he was located in the basement. He didn't have exterior signage, I don't believe. But right now it's the big three. The zoning ordinance would allow them an enormous amount of signage. It's the Heritage Preservation Commission then to kind of rein that in to what's appropriate. Yeah, so that I'm sorry, Chairman Potts, I try to flip-flop when I go through the order, and I forgot to go back to the top of my list. So
That's not a problem. I do have to say I do like the serif style that Case is proposing here. It's more in touch with the 19th century kind of flavor of the buildings we have. But you know, otherwise I think it's fine. I like the border idea too. So let's go.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Further comment? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Member Bruflat,
Aye.
Member Metzen,
Aye.
Member Bergman,
Aye.
Member Douglas,
Aye.
Member Oviatt,
Aye.
Member Latinsky,
Aye.
and back to the top of the list, Mr. Potts.
Aye.
Thank you. A motion approved. I will communicate with Casey as he returns from his vacation. Brian Jones, thank you for bearing with us. And again, Brian Jones from Thrivent Financial, he owns that building, and as you recall, he had undertaken a window replacement of that structure. It might have been as early as last fall. But Mr. Jones has purchased the adjoining property that houses the Chinatown restaurant and the Impulse Tattoo. There's been a broken window on the alley side. I should lick my fingers in COVID, but on page 20, unfortunately, one of the windows was broken. I believe it was reported to me that it was during one of the storms. And so Mr. Jones thought it was appropriate to consider the replacement of all of his second-story windows, both in the front and the back. He has worked with Max DeMars from DeMars Construction, and they are proposing the product then that is displayed on page 21 and again on page 22. I will note the exception will be, and Brian, I did talk to Max this afternoon. I had just a couple questions for clarification, but it will not have the 4 panels over one. It will be 1 panel over 1. And as I went back and looked at the historic photos, it was not a 4 over 1 pattern. As you look at the picture of the front of the building on page 19, it will essentially have the same appearance. You can see that is a rounded window opening, but that is a rectangular window, and you only see maybe the top inch of that window. And so it shows off that it's not rounded. It's very consistent with applications and approvals or projects approved by previous HPCs. Now, it just so happens that at the same time that I was having the conversation with Brian, that Carol Hayes, who owns the other adjoining building that houses contents, she approached me about a window replacement in the back of her building. And so I'm kind of looking for a blanket approval of both projects, because if you look at page 23, there'd be nothing that would tell you these are 2 separate buildings, given the presentation of Minnesota Avenue facade.
No.
And so, as I mentioned, the windows as they'd be replaced would essentially be identical to what you see on the Chinatown. You will note that the windows on the contents building had been altered to an extent that only half of the window opening was remaining in the northern part. The top part of the window then was presented with, I think it's a painted black plywood. Carol has consented that she would intend to work with Max DeMars, who she's worked with in the past, to undertake a window replacement. And she would propose using the same windows that Brian is. So I would ask that you are inclined, if you are inclined, to approve the window replacement as proposed for the Chinatown Impulse Tattoo, that you also give your approval for the same window, the same style, the same manufacturer to be installed on the second floor of the contents building. Also, the windows that would be installed would match the existing glass door of the Chinatown, as well as it would be complementary to the contents rear entry of their building. At this point, I will ask Brian, Brian Jones, do you have anything to add? Any comments?
I actually don't, Russ. Thank you. I thought you said it very well. I think our goal is truly to just swap out a broken and some old, not very functional windows and keep the same look, just put a much better, more improved, safer window in there. So this one's not as complicated as the Thrivent one, pretty straightforward, just trying to put a nice window, keep the look as it is, and make it a little safer for the residents.
Thank you, Brian. Now I'm going to open it up. I'll go through my roll call of the members. If you got questions of me, or if you got questions for Mr. Jones, if you got comments, let us know, and we'll start with Member Metzen. Joe?
I think the windows look fine.
Thank you. Member Bergerman?
Windows look just fine.
Member Douglas?
I'm perfectly okay with it. I appreciate the fact that there's trying to be some consistency and working with other owners, so I'm very in favor of it.
Thank you very much. Brian Oviatt?
Yeah, I think the windows look great. They're going to be good, and I'd like to thank you for making the investment. It's going to look great. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Member Latinsky?
Yes, I think it looks fine. I think it'll be a nice complement to the rest of the building.
Very good. Chairman Potts?
Yeah, I have no trouble with the windows in the back of the building. That's absolutely great, and I hope that we can approve those for the building next door over contents.
Yep.
I do have a question about the appearance of the front of the building. Looking at that picture showing the infamous awning on page 19 of the packet. The windows up there are quite a bit shorter than they are on the Thrivent building. And I just have to assume that the top of the window will be no longer glazed, right? It looks like it's glazed in the current situation, but will be replaced by some sort of semicircle, half disc kind of plywood thing.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, my understanding is that window is a rectangular window. So actually, that top part you see is actually tucked behind the brick. And so unlike the Thrivent building where we had to put that like fake design at the top, this one, that window fills almost that entire space. And
yeah, I sort of thought, Brian, I sort of thought that looking at it, but it was a little hard to tell.
I think some of that might be the shadow in the picture too, but when I look at it from the inside, it's a completely rectangular window. So my hope is that you put in a functional rectangular window, but because of the rounded outward appearance, it actually still gives it a historical feel, even without having a rounded top on the actual window.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm okay with that. That's great. That takes care of my minor anxiety about that. Thank you.
Member Bruflat?
I think the design is great. Like Brian said, I think it's a great investment. So I appreciate that. And actually, looking through the pictures, I do like the 4 pane and 1 pane, but I do appreciate that, Russ, that you went back to the pictures and found that it should be a single pane on the top too. So I don't mind either look, and I like this design.
Yeah, I'll note that these historical pictures are essentially available to everybody. They're on the state's website under the reflections, and you can do some searches, St. Peter, Minnesota Avenue, 300 block, and boom, it'll give you something to look at. So thank you. I will echo the appreciation for the investment that Mr. Jones has made in the properties that he owns, and also Carol Hayes at Contents should be commended. And they've both been easy to work with as HPCs. Obviously it's another hoop to jump through, but they've been very accommodating and very pleasant to work with on this. Would anyone be inclined to move the approval of the installation as proposed by Brian Jones, and then to authorize the installation of the same product on the Contents building, second floor windows?
I so move.
And that was Sharon?
Yep.
Yep, we have a motion by Latinsky. Is there a second?
Potts.
I heard Chairman Potts. We have a motion by Latinsky and a second by Potts. Further discussion,
Sorry.
I would say comment. Hearing no further comment, and it looks like everything's working, I will call the roll call on this one, and I'll start with Member Metzen.
Aye.
Member Bergman,
Aye.
Member Douglas,
Aye.
Member Oviatt,
Aye.
Member Latinsky,
Aye.
Member Potts,
Aye.
Member Bruflat.
Aye.
Motion carried. Brian, get a building permit, you can go to town.
Thank you so much. Appreciate all your help and time.
Like I said,
Hey,
thank you.
Hey, Brian. Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Are you still there?
Yep.
When I look at the Chinatown and the Impulse awning and everything like that, to the right is a white door
Yep.
that maybe goes upstairs. You know,
Mhm.
if there was a door that seemed to fit more with the upper part of the window, it wouldn't seem so like out of character maybe.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm not, this has nothing to do with it. I mean, but if you're ever thinking about any other improvements, I mean, that just kind of stood out to me. That's all.
Sure. Thanks for the feedback.
I'm just glad you weren't going to ask him about your investments.
Well, there's that too, Brian, but okay.
Russ,
Okay.
is that something that without a replacement, could it be painted? Would a color other than white be more welcoming to the committee? Just in general?
I might suggest the black.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the members would have to approve it.
Okay.
But if you were requesting to paint that door black, I do think the white is a little stark and a little
I don't
contrary.
even remember when or how that came about, but I'll come bother you guys another night then.
Hey, thank you very much, though.
Thank
for
you,
your
Brian.
time.
Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.
I don't have anything else for the good of the cause. Emily has a front door seat to watching the old fire station renovations because it's like 120 feet from her house or so. So that is moving on. They've completed the work at the Bolum's Ameriprise. So I don't know if we'll have anything for next month's agenda, but I wouldn't count on us not. So
The Arrow hardware store sign is done.
yep,
Looks pretty good to me, so I think it's come out well.
good.
The endorsed products appear on the other side of that, whatever that pillar is there in the middle of the building, and I think that helps. But I think it's an improvement. So just wanted to say that.
Certainly.
I wanted to bring to the attention, I noticed the Olita building, we approved a sign on a long time ago. They've got those nasty solar lights still dangling up there.
Yeah,
They do not have.
I'll have
that.
some leverage in that matter coming up here just very shortly.
Okay.
It's been put off, but like I said,
Okay.
I believe I can address it now ultimately.
I know it's a rough time, but it looks like hell.
Yep, and I did provide her some literature for some very, what I would consider to be affordable solar powered gooseneck lights. And so the panel would actually be on the roof and yeah, I think that would be appropriate. So I will make a note of that again. Any other questions? I
I
will
just
note.
want to say thank you,
Oh, well, thank
Bergman,
you.
on that light thing. That's been dragging on way too long.
On what was that?
On those lights at that,
Oh, yes.
yeah, that's way too long dragging on.
Yep, I will get a hold of Miss Haas. The other item I was going to mention is the building that's now for lease that used to house the It's About Time clock repair, and it has passionate kiddos in the other half. You will notice that they painted the facade. They painted what had been the painted brickwork black. That was done subject to the approval of an HPC a couple years ago. And so I didn't think she was going to do it because she also wanted to paint the remainder of the brick a lighter color. And she was, the owner was informed that if it's currently painted brick, it's probably better to paint it rather than to try to chemically or otherwise remove the brick. But if it's unpainted brick, it would not be appropriate to paint that. So I never thought she was going to follow through on the one if she didn't get to do the other. And I drove by and I went, oh my gosh, what happened? And then I went back and looked in the packet, and yes, it was approved. That was when we were going through the sandwich board sign, which also wasn't approved. Yes, there's no violation in that case. But it's obviously very noticeable, and I don't think it necessarily looks worse than it was when it was a rust colored paint. So anything else for the good of the cause?
Yeah, Russ, did you want to say anything about that Market Fest that they're having every other Saturday on Minnesota Avenue?
Yeah, Market Fest is an activity that is fully sanctioned by the Chamber of Commerce that provides them with some liberties according to what the city has established for policies. So for those temporary type events, Crazy Days, Market Fest, we do not require HPC review of temporary signage that they would display during the event. They are erecting a number of canopies or tents. We don't require HPC approval of those. They don't need a sidewalk use permit, again, as long as it is a bona fide Chamber of Commerce sanctioned event. And I know Miss Eide and Ms. Johnson and the others that are involved in promoting that activity have worked with Ed Lee, and Ed has corresponded to me that it is a bona fide chamber event, which is important because then it comes with the bona fide chamber liability insurance. So if there's any injuries or damage or liability, it does have a coverage. So does anyone have concerns about an item like that?
No, but I have a concern. Oh,
excuse me, no one has a concern? Go ahead.
I don't want to, okay. This is Sharon. I don't know if this is the appropriate place, but it might be something you can help with, Russ. And that is, I was up at Diamond Dust on Saturday when they were having that Market Fest downtown. And Sherry, the owner of Diamond Dust, really had a nice event schedule there. She had a special little menu thing of barbecue, baked beans, you know, a little deal on a picnic-like thing, and they had some music. And she told me that she's never that nobody communicates with her from downtown on when these Market Fests are going to, you know, handle or happen. So my suggestion, not if you can have anything to say with the chamber people, that she's a real, you know, viable and a real addition to our community. And she's the only really retail space up on top of the hill. So if they could, you know, let her know when they're going to have these events, these marketplace events, so she could advertise what her specialties are and could be a part of that. I think that would be really a really good thing to do for the community and for Sherry.
Yeah, I will mention that to Mr. Lee at the chamber. The chamber is somewhat proprietary. Yeah, they're somewhat proprietary, and if you're not a chamber member, sometimes you're not afforded the opportunity. Yep. So
no, she is.
Yeah,
she is a chamber member.
Yep. So she certainly should, in my view, have the ability to participate in that. Perhaps one of the stores downtown that does not serve a food product would be willing to actually let her put a canopy up in front and serve her decadent cupcakes, things like that.
Yeah,
I think that'd be really smart. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be a really kind thing to do because she's really, her business is, you know, booming. That she's really works really hard for the community, and she's easy to work with on events if you need help, you know, if you need to get something for an event. So I think it'd be really behoove us to really try and encourage the, you know, her inclusion into that, those events that happen on the town is not just the Main Street. I mean, we have, you know, a couple businesses like that really are really valuable to our community.
Thank you. I will.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you.
So, any other comments,
thank you very much.
Before we're asked to adjourn? Would anyone move the adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, I'd second it.
And we have a second. That was a motion by Douglas and a second by Potts. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Y'all have a really nice evening. And I don't want to jinx us, but perhaps when we meet in the next month, will have a little bit, perhaps a face-to-face or even maybe a hybrid like the city council is doing. Thank you very much, all of you, for your volunteering and for your time, and have a wonderful evening. Cindy,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah,
stop.
thank
the
you.
recording.
You too, Russ. Yep. Bye.